Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. And it's Good Friday. And you're thinking, what's so good about Friday other than it being the prelude to the weekend? No, I mean it's Good Friday, as in the day that Christ was taken by Pilate, by the Jews, turned over to Pilate and crucified. And you're saying, what does that have to do with anything? And let me turn the question on you. What does what you're doing today have to do with anything? You consider the mystery of the Bible, you consider the profound influence that the Catholic Church has had on Western civilization, and you begin to wonder whether one of the reasons we're in such a crazy point in our life, both spiritually, nationally, and politically, is that we've lost our moorings. Certainly, I'm at a turning point in my life. I've shared with all of you that a long marriage is dissolving and we'll soon go to court to take care of the distribution of what we've acquired over the years. And as I look back over the years and see my many acts and omissions, some of them are private, obviously, and some of them are public in the world at large. I have a world of haters, for example. HBO aired the new Alex Jones documentary this week, and already the hate mail is coming in. So I've reposted one of them on X and basically asked people, look at this guy. What does he see when he looks in the mirror? And so this morning I came in and I thought, it's Good Friday. Will I make it to church this afternoon? I don't know. Like Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, I'm a man of unclean lips. But I do keep in my office a copy of the Daily Missal. And the Daily Missal is a set of readings designed around the year, produced by the Catholic Church, and the churches throughout the United States and the world use the Missal to guide their teaching. And and Good Friday is obviously a big day for the church. So I want to share with you some words from the Missal, which are excerpts from Psalm 31. And you'll say, wait a minute, Law and Legitimacy's reading excerpts from the Bible? Have these guys lost their mind? Perhaps. Perhaps we've come to our spirit and we've come to our spiritual senses. I know to a moral certainty that there are those of you out there who need to hear these words. And I'd ask you to take a moment and just meditate for a moment. Ask yourself in the depths of your soul whether these words don't speak to you. In you, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your justice, rescue me. Into your hands I commend my spirit. You will redeem me, O Lord, O faithful God. For all of my foes I am an object of reproach, a laughingstock to my neighbors, and a dread to my friends. They who see me abroad flee from me. I am forgotten like the unremembered dead. I am like a dish that is broken. But my trust is in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. In your hands is my destiny. Rescue me from the clutches of my enemies and my persecutors. Let your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your kindness. Take courage and be stout-hearted, all you who hope in the Lord. King David wrote that centuries ago, and I am certain that those words speak to some of you as they do to me. Because who out there isn't like a dish that is broken? Who out there isn't filled to overflowing with gifts that they give and receive, but cannot comprehend, abuse, misplace, and then blame the other for their being broken? Look in the mirror, folks, and you will see that the Psalms speak to the eternal human condition. They prove in some phenomenological sense, now there's one of those $19 words, they prove in some direct spiritual, experiential sense the fact that we are all broken and in need of grace. And I think Good Friday is a day to consider that. In Good Friday recounts the day that Jesus was delivered by the Jewish synagogues to the Roman prelate Pilate, and the day that he was crucified. And the theology surrounding it is logical and mystical and tortured all at the same time. And I don't really care about the theology. I care about the example of the man. This is a man who loved unto death. And he said to his accusers, I am who you say I am. And he permitted them to kill love in the world so that love could be redeemed by its example. The psalmist basically said that he understood his position of radical dependency on an unseen God. In you, O Lord, I take my refuge. Is there not a person honestly listening to this broadcast today who doesn't need the refuge of an unseen and loving God? I know a lot of the people who listen to this show. I've talked to some of you. I read everything that you say. And you're here because, you sense a need for something like companionship. You sense a need for something like the presence of the divine in your life. And sometimes in your lives, or certainly in mine, you become broken, broken enough to be open to what's really important in the world. In you, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your justice, rescue me. Think about that. Justice. Lawyers, you get this, you get that, you get this. Rescue me. Aren't we all in need of redemption? Into your hands I commend my spirit. You will redeem me, O Lord, O faithful God. And this is the part that particularly speaks to me because I am the object of so much hatred because of the cases I have taken and because of the way that I have proceeded through the world. I have been an unbroken dish who insisted on using the shards of every sharp edge I could to cut, attack, maul, and get what I wanted. I have an indomitable will, and you can't stop me except by closing the last courthouse door in my face, and then I'll rail against the door, claiming it was closed unjustly. And for this I am scorned. For all my foes, I am an object of reproach, a laughingstock to my neighbors, and a dread to my friends. They who see me abroad flee from me. I am forgotten like the unremembered dead. I am like a dish that is broken. I identify with that, and I suspect that all of us do in some ways or another because we've all betrayed the love that we've been given. We've all betrayed ourselves, and that is the human condition. But my trust is in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. In your hands is my destiny. Rescue me from the clutches of my enemies and my persecutors. We're all in need of rescuing, frankly, and no one person can rescue another person. We can only be rescued by an act of faith unto death, and the radical power of love. And that's the example of Jesus on Good Friday. So, I'm not going to pretend like I got hit by a lightning bolt and that suddenly I understand the meaning of it all. But I am going to say the following. You disregard the church. You disregard the teaching of a book that's been kicking around for several millennia at your peril. There's a reason that the Bible continues to exist. There's a reason that the churches continue to exist. And I don't want to hear the cheap chatter about, I'm not going to go to the Catholic Church. Look at what they do to little boys. The church has lost its ability to be an example of grace in the world by reminding people even priests have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And each and every one of us needs the redemptive power of love to become whole in a broken world. It's simply the truth. And you can rail against it. You can call a religion a crutch. You can come up with all the conventional arguments for and against the existence of God. I know them all. I've argued them all. I've lived through them all. And at the other side of them all, there is this shocking recognition that we have crutches, all of us, that we are in need of. And the Bible, Jesus, the psalmists, and I don't know other traditions. I'm not going to pretend to be an evangelist here. I make my living the hard way, representing people accused of crimes, and we made our first nominal profit on our show here. Hopefully, we'll make more. I'm not going to pretend to speak for God. I will speak only as one broken dish to another, and say, don't ignore your need for a crutch. Choose the crutch that has endured over millennia, and that is by responding to an act of faith. Cry out with the psalmist, as the psalmist says, but I put my trust in you, O Lord. You are my God. In your hands is my destiny. Rescue me from the clutches of my enemies and persecutors. Let your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your kindness. Take courage and be stout-hearted, all ye who hope in the Lord. The Psalms, friends, have existed longer than the United States Constitution. The Psalms, friends, have existed longer than Western civilization, or at least, as spawned by the Greco-Roman component of it. The Psalms are part of our spiritual substance, and I would suggest to you that one of the reasons our times is out of focus is we've lost the eyes of faith. And as the world around us, in its political expression, the dissonance between how we live and what we want and the rhetoric we use, the gap between the rhetoric and the lives we choose to live, that gap is the gap between our focusing on what's important, that is the love of God and the love of one another, and focusing on the love of the wrong thing. And thus, when we talk about the bottom falling out of pluralism, thus when we talk about the pot saying to the potter, thus when we talk about the morbid pathology of identity politics, basically what we're seeing are people choosing the wrong crutch. Choose wisely, my friends. No one gets out of here alive, but you may get out of here with a little bit of grace. So on that moment, let's go back to being the cynical assholes that we are. I wish you all a happy Good Friday. Certainly, I might try to make it into church today. Usually when I go in, the music from The Exorcist plays. I once walked into a church and blood started spouting out of the statuary at the feet of Jesus. And the priest said, in nomine Patre, get on. And some music for, and then the music from The Exorcist started to play. The pews began to smolder. And, I have to ask myself, why in the world all that melodrama? What in me rails against the concept of grace? What in me rails against the concept of falling into the arms of a loving God and a loving community? And I realize all at once the problem is mine. And the Psalms summon faith in a better world. So let's happy Easter, everyone. Be blessed and find your own way in the world. That's your responsibility. We can but point at things that help us. And John Eastman certainly needs some help. He's going to be disbarred. What's up with this, Mike?
So John Eastman was subject to, I think, 11 counts of misconduct in California. He is a defendant in the Georgia RICO case. He's a co-defendant in the Georgia election case. But he obviously has not been convicted of any crime. He hasn't pled guilty to anything. And that has not precluded ethical proceedings against him in the state of California. And a couple of days ago, the judge there, I believe her name is Judge Rowland, if I'm not mistaken, recommended that he be disbarred. This is out of California. She said, quote, that he conspired with President Trump to obstruct a lawful function of the government of the United States, specifically by conspiring to disrupt the electoral count on January 6, 2021. So he will be taking an appeal. I think what I'm struck with or struck by in reading this story, Norm, is the hypocrisy that is really obvious in terms of conduct of practicing attorneys and their treatment by our system right now, just depending on the perceived political bent or the perceived political bent of the client for whom the representation is given.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's hard to unsee that. I think for our viewers and listeners, John Eastman he clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas. He also founded the Constitutional Center at the Claremont Institute. He is the dean of Chapman University School of Law. So this is not an individual or an attorney that is fly by night or otherwise out beyond.
You're not saying he's not Lynn Wood on a toot, in other words, right?
I'm saying this is a very serious lawyer. This is a very very serious, very self-aware, highly competent lawyer. Someone ostensibly that has a lot to lose. And in this case, Norm, I'm also met with the fact that I said that he hasn't been convicted or of anything in Georgia, and that's true. No one has, except
so I want to unpack a little bit Eastman's predicament, and I want to shed light on it especially for non-lawyers, so that you understand what goes on in the cauldron that is a law office, and you understand a lawyer's ethical and professional responsibilities. It all begins with a phone call or a touch. A person reaches out to you and says, "I need help," and the lawyer responds and said, "How can I help you?" And the person describes their situation. People come to lawyers because lawyers are counselors, because lawyers know what to expect in the world of the law, and they can advise on prospective courses of conduct. Clients come with interests. They are things they want. And so the lawyer's responsibility is to find out what a client wants and to use the law as best as he possibly or she possibly can to advance those interests, unless those interests are unlawful. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday in the context of the Jimmy Hoffa rule. Guy comes in and says, I want to, as I once had a young man come in and said, how do I kill this guy who disrespected my mom and get away with it? I can't answer that question. I threw the kid out of the office. A person comes in and says, I killed my mother's antagonist. I needed defense from the law. I can represent that man. Similarly, with respect to Donald Trump and Eastman, I want to hold office. I believe the election was stolen. What can I do to, what can I do? What theories can I advance under the shadow of the law to vindicate my claim to electoral success? The line between the Jimmy Hoffa line in this case is very narrow. And so who's the judge? Judge Rowland, did you say, Mike?
Yvette Rowland.
Yeah, so Judge Yvette said, basically that Eastman, if he didn't commit a crime, he engaged in professional misconduct because he helped Trump advance clearly illegitimate and unlawful ends. Now, Mike, I disagree that there need not be with you, I think, and I may have not fully heard and understood what you said. I don't think there needs to be a criminal conviction.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I was going to get to by making that point is that he makes his money by practicing law. And so
Right.
he therefore provides for his own defense in paying other lawyers through through practicing law. So to recommend and to disbar someone during the pendency of the type of criminal action that he's having to defend himself against in Georgia, to me, is a higher level consciousness on this matter.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back. Yeah, higher level consciousness. You sound like me reading from the Psalms first thing in the morning. I freaked myself out doing that. So let me go back to the law's trenches, the things I know better. The life of the spirit, not so well. But with respect to Eastman, a lawyer. There's a famous line from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. in the common law that a lawyer counsels clients on bargaining within the law's shadows, fine. I don't know what that means. I think the shadows that are cast most often in the law come from within the hearts and minds of the people who are participating in the process. But a lawyer has a professional responsibility to be a zealous advocate for his client, to engage in candor toward the tribunal, that is, being truthful to the judges, and not to break the law. Beyond that, all bets are off. Lawyers are expected to use their imagination and advance legal theories that are sometimes creative. So in federal practice, there is something called Rule 11 sanctions. You can be sanctioned if you bring a patently frivolous claim. So, for example, Mike Boyer files a lawsuit against the state of North Carolina for not permitting him to be on the presidential ballot, even though he's under the age of 35, and by claiming that's an unconstitutional provision. Good luck with that. That's probably a frivolous claim, and a lawyer advancing that might well face consequences. The legal theories that Eastman propounded on Donald Trump's behalf may not have been well established within existing law, but Rule 11 has another safe harbor provision. That is, you can raise claims that are based on a good faith belief in the extension of existing law. So certainly the events of January 6th or the election of 2020 going into January 2021 were unprecedented in our time. And Eastman took his law scholar hat and said, what is the best case that can be made to serve Donald Trump's interest within the frame of the law? And he advanced novel legal theories. The notion that some judge, Judge whatever her name is, I already forgot it again.
Yvette Rowland.
I'm blocking on her because the specter of her is terrifying. That the fact that Yvette Rowland can decide, I don't like your theories. Those are irresponsible. You're a criminal, absent any evidence of criminality, is shocking to me and chills the bar in fundamental ways. Now, I don't happen to believe the election was stolen in 2020. I happen to think a lot of the legal stuff that was thrown into the air lacks integrity and is garbage, and the courts agreed because those claims didn't advance. But Eastman had every right to advance novel legal claims. He had every right to test them in the court. He had every right to see just how far the law's shadow extended. And for a judge to threaten to disbar him is a direct threat to the independence of every lawyer in the United States. So if you're a practicing lawyer, I'm calling on you to rally behind Eastman today.
Well,
because
here's Clark as well, right? So Jeffrey Clark, you may remember.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you may remember him. He's also a co-defendant in the Georgia election case with Trump, and his disbarment hearing, or his disciplinary hearing with the DC bar, began this week. And so you can see from this headline that he's asserting his Fifth Amendment privilege. in that so far, but that will come on the heels of what we just seen in California. So the Eastman is the first of what we will begin as a profession dealing with, and I think that you and I, Norm, will play an important role in the way that that conversation unfolds if we want it.
Well, I think we're going to have to because, yet we were talking yesterday or no, I've given a lot of radio and television interviews this week. It's been that kind of week. I guess I was on WABC overnight radio and it was taped the other morning and played last night. And the interviewer asked whether what was so important about judicial independence. And I think I said, what was important about it was the development of a coherent body of law in a complex and evolving world. And by detaching judges from the day-to-day economic concerns the rest of us share, we set them free to become, in effect, members of a priesthood, of a caste whose role it is to develop a body of law that will govern the rest of us in our particular circumstances. I would say that the independence of the bar is as important, because insofar as a federal judiciary with lifetime appointees is responding to claims before it in a way that is untethered to economic interests, I think lawyers need to be untethered to the judge's views of what is and is not an appropriate application of the law, and need to be set free to explore novel legal theories, especially in our times where the political landscape is consumed by nothing but noise. And we are groping forward into an unknown future, looking for a coherent sense of spiritual, social, political, and cultural significance that's not that we're not obviously talking about here. I don't know about the rest of you, but I watched the 2024 election campaign with absolute horror. I mean, it's not even comedic. It's just tragic. I mean, the amount of noise that is being made that's disconnected from the lives that people live. It's like we live in a spiritual echo chamber. We know there's pain at the bottom of the mine shaft and the canaries keep tweeting, but we can't quite focus on the mine shaft. And so I view this attack on Eastman as a judicially sponsored form of lawfare that must stop. We'll be looking out to support Eastman, and we'll probably find ways to direct you all to support his legal defense financially, because I think this issue needs to get in front of the United States Supreme Court. It is a clear and present danger to every lawyer who takes risks on behalf of their clients, because it is the job of a lawyer to test the limits of the law. Let me tell you a funny anecdote, then we'll move on.
Before you do the anecdote, Lawyer Will has a pretty good point. And I like these rhetorical questions. Lawyer Will says, if Eastman's opinions were so erroneous, why did Congress pass the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022? If Eastman was so out to lunch, congressional action wouldn't be necessary. The Clark situation is even crazier. It's based on an internal letter that was leaked to the media. State bars are attempting to punish lawyers for the thought crimes of having political ideas they don't agree with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And great points, Lawyer Will. And I think this is a perfect example of it. But here's a funny, I had a discussion with a judge in Chambers this week. There's a First Amendment issue arising out of a hate speech case, a civil case that I'm involved in. And we went to Chambers, as often happens, my adversary and I, to discuss the shape of the argument to come and to give the judge such assistance in understanding the issues as could be had. Because after all, judges don't want to look stupid on the bench. I mean, they want to look like they have a command of the proceedings. So an issue comes up, the judge asks what your position is. I said, well, I have to object. My client's interest suggests that I need to force you to make a decision on an unsettled area of law. And I said, Judge, a lawyer's responsibility is to win if they can, to preserve issues for appeal in case they lose. But I said, where the rubber meets the road is lawyers need to force error. It's my job to force you to make a difficult decision in unclear areas of the law on my client's behalf. And the judge looked at me and he smiled. He says, well, I support the first two. I said, I know, but I live for the third. And we agreed to disagree, and we moved on. So Eastman cannot and should not be punished for being a creative lawyer. If we talked earlier in the week about legal education and the extent to which lawyers are now trained to be mere widget manufacturers. No, John Eastman, labored in the vineyard of genius. He may have come up with stupid ideas that the courts reject, but I'd rather have the vineyard doors open than slammed shut, so that we're required to drink diluted grape juice.
And what is the, what is the lesson to be learned by other practitioners from this? I think that's an important question to ask. And principally, I think it's don't favor the populist right political movement, right? And
Well, so let's move on. Hey, what's going on in Texas?
you tell me, man. Governor Abbott is a little bit, so this is the border crisis in Texas has given Governor Abbott, he has kind of recalibrated his political life. The First Amendment may be something else to him, and it makes supporting establishment conservatives really difficult because we've talked pretty openly on this stream several times about the Israel-Hamas war and what's going on. We talked about these situations at Ivy League institutions and spent a great deal of time discussing the congressional testimony of certain deans in their remarks when asked about harassment on college campuses. But just a couple of days ago, Governor Abbott signed an executive order requiring all higher education institutions in Texas to establish protocol and to begin reporting on steps that they are taking to enforce speech policies against specific student groups, and it names one in particular. I'll pull it up if you want to take the lead for a second, please.
So, I hear, the First Amendment is supposed to be content neutral, and thus, the ACLU defended Nazis in Skokie, who wanted to march in favor of Nazism, even though through a neighborhood that was heavily populated by survivors of the Holocaust. A shocking affront to their sensibilities and a reminder of the horror that they had endured and through which many of them passed with the loss of many a family member. And so a complex body of First Amendment law has emerged that said the state cannot abridge freedom of speech or penalize people for what they say, and the state's rules have to be content neutral. So Abbott, he appears to be flirting with crossing the line from content neutrality to endorsing a particular point of view, and that is a point of view that is in favor of restricting.
I don't know that flirting is really even it accurately describes. I mean, here are the three items that he is requiring through his executive order. I'm just going to read. One, all Texas higher education institutions must do the following. 1, review and update free speech policies to address the sharp rise in anti-Semitic speech and acts on university campuses and establish appropriate punishments, including expulsion from the institution. 2, ensure that these policies are being enforced on campuses and that groups such as the Palestine Solidarity Committee and Students for Justice in Palestine are disciplined for violating these policies. So interesting call out there, Norm, in terms of flirting with adopting or favoring certain perspectives over others. Number 2 mentions 2 specific student groups in executive order. Number 3, include the definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the state of Texas in section 444.001 of the Texas Government Code and university free speech policies to guide university personnel and students on what constitutes anti-Semitic speech. You talked about a speech exception to the First Amendment, and you've talked about that consistently over the last several years. I think we are closer than ever with things like this than we were getting with more of the.
Well, let me make a confession. I worry about hate speech restrictions, but I'm not as offended by Abbott's move as you are, because I think that anti-Semitism is candidly attacking one of the pillars of Western civilization. We are a Judeo-Christian civilization, no matter what you want to say about it. And I think that one of the things when I worry about the bottom falling out of pluralism and identity politics creating severe dislocation and fracturing in our society, I can't help but wonder whether we are outrunning our coverage. Once we outrun the spiritual foundations of our civilization, are we courting chaos? But I hear what you're saying, Mike, and I would be more comfortable if Abbott tried to be a little bit more general and talk about limitations on hate speech, but not the speech itself, but conduct based on speech. That's the paradigm that the existing law requires. And so this is going to clearly be struck down by our courts.
Obviously, and that's why I wanted to get to my point, because I don't want anybody to mistake where I'm at on the issue, on the spectrum of issues between Israel and Palestine. I'm talking specifically about the unforced error that this is for somebody in Abbott's position. It seems tone deaf to where most younger people are on this issue, and it also
so much the worse for most younger people. Look, I mean, no, I'm an old man.
This is damaging to a Republican Party that if it just does not fuck things up, pardon me, pardon my French, but if it doesn't mess things up, has the ability to retake the White House in November. And these are the things that are going to make it very complicated and convoluted when it comes.
But let's play the long game. I don't care who takes the White House in 2024. There's a spiritual sickness and crisis in the land that reflects a deeper philosophical and political problem and moral and religious problem. And we've talked about Trump as the canary in the coal mine. And I've said on this show, and I'll say it again, Trump won't live forever. And when he's gone, we're going to be left looking at the coal mine. And I want to direct attention away from the candidates to the coal mine itself. What is it that people are hungering for that makes this dissonant politics so crazy? And I'm not talking dissident, I'm saying dissonant politics with rhetoric that just simply doesn't match the reality of our lives. And I get the it's not a sitcom, it's a tragic, it's not even a tragic comedy, it's just tragic what's going on in American politics. So I think that Abbott, I hear what you're saying, Mike, and I respect it, and I respect you enormously, as you know. I love you even. This is a bad move, and I'm not sure why,
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Timing is awkward to me. What people expect out of Texas right now is a strenuous opposition to the federal administration's reluctance to enforce border policy, right? And it's incredibly important. This, to me, breaks apart the foundation of what is otherwise a pretty solid and monolithic coalition of people who support Texas in that effort. Governor Abbott doing this is a huge unforced error, in my opinion. Like I said, it doesn't read the room. It's totally tone deaf to the way that people read this, but we also don't want this to begin to soil your efforts in another realm, which is arguably and obviously more important right now.
I think that this may be an unforced error on Abbott's part. It may be a crack in the facade that permits something else to grow. So let's take a look at it. Hey, let's just pivot from this. We'll follow the Abbott thing. So Dawn McNeil is one of our more dedicated listeners. She's here most mornings and she has comments, and every now and then she pokes at me, and I love it. So Dawn asks, let's read some retributive psalms. So here we are now, folks, in the existential confessional, and Saint Odysseus is behind behind the veil, and Dawn enters into the confessional and says, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I want retributive psalms being read." And the priest says to her, "My daughter, what anger lurks within you that when there is a cry for justice and love, you respond with anger? Dawn, dawn, dawn. Remember, you're a broken dish. We love you on Good Friday and every day. And here's your penance. Go out and play some pickleball."
Do that.
Hey, what are we doing this afternoon, Mike?
At noon today, your boys are...
That'd be us.
Back on Laid Back Law Show with Eric Hunley and Nate the Lawyer. And we'll see who from that crew will join. But we've been invited back. You can believe that. And so we'll be on there again at 12 noon Eastern time. We'll be plugging Law Pod Daily and talking about whatever they've got going on their agenda. I'm sure that a few of the things that we've discussed this morning will be back in focus. I really hope that we get, and maybe we should just force this conversation about John Eastman and the practice of law with so many people that'll be joining us live, Norm, for that stream. That may be wise.
Okay.
More lawyers
about it. A couple miscellaneous questions. Freedom Lover, how's your law license, Norm? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask it. I'm still licensed to practice law in the state of Connecticut. Yes, you will recall Judge Barbara Bellis in New Haven, who presided over the Alex Jones miscarriage of justice trial, suspended me for 6 months for the handling of some records. We took an appeal of that and got the stay suspended. That appeal has been argued in the Connecticut appellate courts. It was argued January 2nd of this year. There'll be a decision any day now. If I lose, we'll take a certification to the Connecticut Supreme Court. If I lose that, I'll be out for 6 months. And candidly, that would be welcome at this point, because I think, my commitment to the law is absolute. My commitment to the First Amendment is absolute. My commitment to a good society and a better world is also absolute. And the law is but one part of that. There are other vocations and other things to do. And, if I'm suspended, I'll certainly go out and do them for 6 months. And who knows what's next? I'm starting to travel the country to do stand-up comedy, performed in Bridgeport this week, will be in Atlanta soon, was at Mohegan Sun. And my view is that comedy, an open soul exposed to the world, reflects the tensions of our time and invites people to move into something else. And God knows we need to move into something else. Other question, Gold Star, Connecticut. Gold Star, Connecticut. Hey, Norm, do you still have trial in Danbury? I do. We're starting a case of State of Connecticut versus Dew McCauley. Jury, myself and 2 lawyers, my partner, Brittany Paz, and another lawyer will try the case. It'll last about a month. It's a fraud trial. I don't want to say anything about the trial for fear of running afoul of ethical policemen. Mike, who is this who gave us a sense that they're trying to subscribe and get an unsubscribe notice? What's that all about?
So there's a number of people who are in the stream today that we have brought over from Laid Back Law. So that's awesome. I mean, we got a huge boost in subscribers from that. But it's nice that we've got people hanging around. Phyllis and Sadie, thank you. Ellen so-and-so, love the name, so-and-so. FYI, I keep getting an unsubscribed indicator on your channel. I don't know how best to address that other than to encourage you to turn your notifications on and to keep subscribing, please. And if we can get another boost of subscribers today, maybe YouTube is just not used to us having as much activity on our channel in such a short time.
So in other words, what Mike is asking you to do is behave like an insane person. Do something you fail. You're gonna have to do it all over again and expect a different result. And that's what we broken dishes do in the business of living, So, we leave you today with happy wishes for a happy Easter. And a reminder that today is Good Friday. Those of you who are atheists, well, that's your problem. But I summon you to consider the example of Christ. When handed over to Pilate, Pilate says to him, do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you, that I have the power to crucify you? Jesus answered him, you would have no power over me if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin. Remember, folks, the following. And, think about this. This is an obvious truth. Consider all the world infinitely vast around you. Consider what you know. You may be a cook. You may be a chef. You may be a car driver. You may be a lawyer. There are things within your craft that you respond to in the world. And that's how you make your living. That's how you make your way in the world. There are things you don't know that you want to know. Hey, I don't know how to cook a souffle. I don't know Latin, but you know how to go about knowing them. And then there are things you don't know that you don't know. Think about that for a moment. There is an infinity beyond, and open yourself to the possibilities in that beyond. There are things summoning you to a new and richer life. You're thinking, that sounds kooky. But if you think about it, there's nothing kooky about it. It's obvious. Happy Easter, everyone.
Happy Easter, Norm. Happy Easter, Law and Legitimacy. Well, we'll call you LA Aliens. We'll be back on Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. We're here every Monday morning through Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, Rumble, and on X at LawPod Daily. You can find our shows in audio-only format on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, wherever you find your premium podcasts. I'm looking forward to seeing you, Norm, at noon. I'll probably join the stream a little bit late, but it's a laid-back show. So those of us who are invited kind of come and go. So AMF Yo-Yo.
AMF Yo-Yo. He's risen. Take care, folks.
Bye, Norm.